You ever watch a movie about a 13-year-old girl dealing with the sudden manifestation of her inherited ability to turn into a red panda when she gets emotional, and you think, why didn't this talk about 9/11? So, Turning Red is a movie that came out recently, and it's very wholesome and cute, though I have to admit that it's not the kind of movie I typically gravitate toward. When a friend first linked me the trailer a while back, I was like, just not the kind of concept that interests me, you know? What made me watch it in the end, though, was the explosion of truly bizarre takes that came out about the movie. And I mean, just going on Rotten Tomatoes and looking at the most recent audience reviews, these were what I found. It's completely inappropriate as the opening of the movie glorifies the self rather than honoring your mother and father. If we keep indoctrinating our kids and the future kids with do what you feel and glorify that, our society is going to be chaos. There is also blatant witchcraft, mockery of the Christian God. There is so much to unpack here. Let's just say that it's very ironic that the reviewer complains about indoctrination in this movie while saying stuff like that. Next up, Chinese movie. Don't like it. Pixar needs to move away from China stuff. That one's just blatantly racist, whatever. Then there's very uncomfortable to watch a child twerk in her mother's face, go out looking highly sexualized with animal ears and a tail, and a group of 13-year-olds going to a concert alone with no intention to tell a responsible adult. Having animal ears and a tail on is highly sexualized? I mean, fine that you do pet play in the privacy of your bedroom, but don't make it weird for kids. If you thought any part of this movie was highly sexualized, you're the problem. By the end of the movie, the main character says, "My body, my panda," or something along those lines, which that one sentence is completely supporting killing babies or abortion. Turning Red supports killing babies. You heard it here, folks. Then there's a review that reflects the most infamous sentiment the movie has triggered. I watched it with my 9-year-old son, and some of the things that were talked about in the movie weren't things I wanted to discuss with my son yet. What, like periods? If your 9-year-old son has questions about periods, wouldn't you just have to say, oh yeah, it's something that happens to most girls as they grow up. They start bleeding once a month, but it's something as natural as pooping or peeing. It's not something they can control, though, so be kind if you happen to find out that one of them is going through it. Some girls start their periods as early as 10 years old nowadays. A 9-year-old boy is old enough to know about it. And while we're on this topic, we really need to get rid of this association of periods with becoming a woman. Not even getting into how not everyone who menstruates is a woman. This is an outdated notion simply because of modern nutrition. Periods start way earlier now, in 10, 11, or 12-year-olds. It is a children's issue. We should recognize that periods start in childhood and let the kids stay kids while handling it. If people didn't treat the topic of periods as such an adult taboo, maybe I wouldn't have been so embarrassed to get mine at 12 that I told nobody and tried to handle it with wads of toilet paper. Spoiler, it didn't work and it was very messy. But no, people refuse to be normal about it. They're all, it was rated PG, but felt like an M. Wow, these reviewers are so repressed and clearly do not know that PG stands for parental guidance. And these aren't even the weirdest takes. There is more than one review that criticized the movie for not considering the impacts of
the September 11th terrorist attacks. I bring this up because it radically altered the culture of the time, in ways that make this movie feel exceptionally ignorant of the time.
Children of every race and color get along without even the faintest whiff of racism or tension, which is all well and good until you remember that this colorblind feel-good frolic is quite specifically supposed to take place just a few months after 9/11.
Because apparently no one was having fun or being trusting for a solid year after 9/11, even when they're not even American. So what did I think of this movie? Lots of people have been asking me. Before I get into it though, I gotta give a shout out to the sponsor of this video, Surfshark VPN. As a Canadian like Domi Shi, the director of this movie, I find Surfshark to be an invaluable tool when I'm browsing the internet, because it can help me get around the many annoying geo-restrictions that media companies place on their content. For example, WoW Presents Plus, the official streaming site for Drag Race, won't let me watch Canada's Drag Race itself, even though I paid for a subscription. But it's no big deal in the end because I can just click one button on Surfshark to switch my IP address to another country and I can watch all the Drag Race I want. Surfshark is available as a desktop program, a browser extension, and an app for mobile devices. And one account comes with unlimited installations, so you can use all of these on all the devices that you own. What's more, Surfshark encrypts your data. I've had to travel a lot lately for book events, and when I have to use shady airport or hotel Wi-Fi, I switch Surfshark on just for an extra layer of protection. You can use my code JAO to get Surfshark for 83% off plus 3 extra months for free. They have a 30-day money-back policy, so you have nothing to lose in deciding to try it out. I'll put the link in the description below. And speaking of book events, I'm going on tour in the US for the launch of Zacharyun and the Dragon Emperor, my middle grade debut. The plans right now are for me to hit Boston, New York, Austin, and San Diego from May 12th to May 15th. Keep an eye on my social media for the precise tour schedule. Anyway, let's get into my opinions on Turning Red. In the background of this family picture, the giant character is Xiao, or filial piety. The smaller text says, "Of all things, peace is the most precious. Of the 100 virtues, filial piety is the foremost," which is a classic saying that basically sums up Confucian family values, which I have never had a high opinion of. Like, what if your family sucks, bro? I'm not just gonna sit here and take it, like, sorry, Confucius. What's interesting is that the mom is wearing a chito on her head. This headdress comes from Manchu nobility of the late Qing dynasty, so Mei's family might be part Manchu. Or it could just be a pretty prop that's equally likely. About Mei Ling's name, though. This was the one representation aspect of this movie that I was iffy with, cause Mei Ling is a very, very overused name for a Chinese girl in Western media. I highly suspect this is because of Song Mei Ling, the wife of Chiang Kai-shek, who was president of the Republic of China during World War II. She was the most well-known Chinese woman in the Western world in the first half of the 20th century. She was educated in the US, and after she married Chiang Kai-shek, she toured the US giving speeches everywhere to rally support for China as the Japanese Empire invaded. So I guess Mei Ling then became the default Chinese girl name in English media? But it's about time we move past it. In Turning Red, Mei Ling's family at least does the culturally accurate thing of calling her by a baby name, Mei Mei. What I do love about Mei Ling's design and characterization, and also that of her friends, is that they're very realistically teenage girl, which I now realize is surprisingly rare in media. How often do you see teenage girls be portrayed as dorky and awkward, as they are, instead of miniature supermodels? Mei Ling and her friends are unabashed fangirls of the boy band Four Town, which consists of Jessie, Taeyong, Robert, Aaron T, and Aaron Z, which is rather unrealistically diverse for an early 2000s boy band. This movie is giving early 2000s record labels a lot of credit. This movie also gave me plenty of flashbacks to the dorky things I did with my friends at Mei Ling's age, most of which are too embarrassing to repeat. I am so glad we never went viral during our phase of trying to be YouTube comedy stars like Smosh. And I am so glad I've switched aliases like 5 times online, so all of you will never be able to find my old tracks. I know it's just harmless fun, but some things are better left in the moment than on record. Something I can't personally comment on, even though I'm Canadian, is how authentic this movie's portrayal of Toronto is, because I've never lived there. But my friends from there say it's pretty spot on. They've even managed to pinpoint some locations that were sampled. The couplet on the sides of Mei Ling's family temple entrance seems to be an original one by the production team, because I couldn't find an older source for it anywhere. The right side says, "The flowing rivers and 100 streams have the same source." Then the left side is presumably about leaves and branches having the same roots. It's very fitting for an ancestral temple. The moment I saw this portrait of Mei Ling's ancestor Sung Yi, I was immediately like, ooh, a very Ming Dynasty outfit. And later on, the movie background details confirmed that Sung Yi did indeed live in the Ming Dynasty. So kudos to the production team for the details. The red pandas in the temple are, sadly, a straight couple. One clearly has a cub under her paw, while the other has a ball under his paw. No gay guardians this time, I'm sorry. What I find very interesting though is that the Li family temple honors exclusively its female members. or at least honors its women the most, which is the opposite of how traditional family temples usually work. I was even confused for a second about whether the mom was the one who married into the family or the dad, but I think it's the dad, and the family name actually passes by the female line, which is super cool. I don't want anyone calling this a cultural inaccuracy because this movie is directed by a Chinese woman, and there is nothing wrong with putting a spin on your own culture. I could totally buy that a family in which a magical power passes down along the female line would become matrilineal. Did you know that there is actually a matriarchal ethnic group in China, the Mosuo? Their inheritance passes through the female line, and the women often raise the children communally. Though I am oversimplifying here because the precise workings of their society are often muddled because they deliberately play up the matrilineal aspect for tourists, so do your own research. I haven't done enough myself. Domi-shi definitely filled this movie up with a lot of familiar nods to her Chinese upbringing, like the show playing on the TV is clearly inspired by TVB dramas, and suggests that Mei Ling's family are Cantonese speakers, who probably came from southern China. Which makes sense. They're pretty deep diaspora, and most early Chinese immigrants were from the south. Making dumplings or sesame balls while watching C-dramas is something that my family does a lot too. And also familiar is Mei Ling's mom bringing her a plate of orange slices and not knocking before she enters Mei Ling's room. My mom doesn't understand the concept of privacy either. When I was 12, I installed a sliding lock on my door and she still tried to force it open so many times that the screw was at one point halfway loose out of the plaster. Mei Ling is a much better kid than I was though. I never won any awards when I was in school, especially not in sports, and I was never as close to my mom as she was to hers. And I was never obedient. If I were to direct this movie, it would be about Mei Ling deliberately bringing the red panda curse upon herself and being alright now family, deal with it. Here's where the controversial stuff starts. Some people were horrified that Mei Ling draws sexy fan art of herself and an older boy at 13, when it's just like them holding each other. The absolute mildest fan art. Let me tell you, when I was 13, I was sorting fanfiction.net by the M rating, if you know what I mean. I understand the unwillingness to face this side of teenagers, to acknowledge that our precious babies have these budding feelings and desires, but reality isn't gonna go away just because we pretend like it doesn't exist. This movie probably has the most realistic depiction of teenage girls in my recent memory, and that's a good thing. We should normalize the true teenage girl experience, not shame it away. I really doubt that there would be the same controversy if the movie featured a 13-year-old boy dropping lovey-dovey pictures of himself with an older girl. If I were a parent to a small girl who saw this movie, I'd see this as an opportunity to start a conversation with her. I'd tell her there is no shame in drawing fun pictures like Mei Ling did, and that I would never be like Mei Ling's mom and show them to anyone else, especially not the boy himself. This way, I'd be letting her know that it's safe to come and talk to me about her romantic feelings, because I wouldn't freak out and judge her. My parents made me feel like I had to hide everything from them because we never had conversations like this, and that is not the way I want the future generation to grow up. But I do not have children and don't ever plan to, so the only thought I had in mind while watching this was, man, thank God I'm not a teenager anymore. This joke about sunblock is very Asian. Very fancy Asian, anyway. East Asia produces the best sunscreen, I swear. I didn't get this good of skin without sunscreen and my 12-step Asian skincare routine, okay? Side note, I do appreciate how this movie blends Chinese and Canadian influences perfectly. Like the maple leaf-shaped bottles of syrup, the maple leaf t-shirt Mei Ling wears, and the Timbits on the table here. This whole country's a theme park, I swear. But the most Chinese thing that stuck out to me was actually the fuzzy toilet seat cover right here. It is so Chinese. If only they could have taken it all the way and had the toilet seat itself covered too, but it probably would have grossed people out too much. So Mei Ling freaks out over turning into a red panda, but her mom mistakes it for the ultimate forbidden taboo topic of periods. Ooh. I don't know if the red peony blooming is slang in Cantonese for periods, but fun fact, in Mandarin, the slang for periods is auntie, like auntie has come to visit. I think it's too soon is a minor nod to how periods are coming earlier and earlier nowadays and catches parents off guard. It's nice that Mei Ling's mom was so prepared anyway, because my parents certainly were not. Hence me trying to handle it with toilet paper. Man, I was such a mess. Honestly, all this period controversy reflects a broader tendency for society to over-sexualize the female body, or what's commonly perceived as the female body, to be more trans-inclusive. And with this over-sexualization comes the desire to oppress and shame women into hiding themselves away. Think of the debates around breastfeeding in public. Some people are against it because breasts are sex organs. No, the actual function of breasts is to feed babies. Just because your husband likes to suck on your titties doesn't mean you have the right to make it weird for all the hungry babies out there. It's not weird unless you make it weird. Thinking back, I have no idea why I felt so self-conscious about my breasts growing and my period coming. Like, what was there to be embarrassed about? It was the attitudes of other people that made me feel like I was supposed to be ashamed. I remember my breasts started growing when I was like 9 or 10, and I was still in China back then, and my grandma freaked out about it. She thought I was growing them so early because of the added hormones in the fried chicken made by the street vendor in our neighborhood, so she banned me from getting fried chicken from there. I thought there was something wrong with me for getting boobs so early. Anyway, back to the movie. Mei Ling's mom thinks she forgot her pads, and so she sneaks into her school to publicly deliver them. It's another moment that made certain reviewers go, wow, what kind of parent would ever act this way? This movie is way too over the top. And it's like, man, so your parents respected your privacy and dignity? Cannot relate. It is fascinating to see the difference in reactions to Mei Ling's mom from Chinese audiences versus non-Chinese audiences. I'd scroll through the reviews of this movie on Chinese websites and didn't see any complaints about her behavior being unrealistic. Meanwhile, it's come up a lot in non-Chinese reviews. I actually ran into a similar issue when Zachary and the Dragon Emperor was in its early stages. My white beta readers were like, wow, his mom is so mean. Why would he risk his life to get her back? Meanwhile, my Chinese beta readers were like, oh man, that's totally my mom. So there is clearly a big dissonance in parental styles across cultures, and this can affect the way we receive media from cultures that aren't our own. Personally, I don't think that no parent would ever act like this is ever a valid criticism, because parenting is a huge spectrum. If a writer wrote about a parent acting a certain way, the behavior is clearly possible from their perspective. If you think Mei Ling's mom is over the top, congratulations that your childhood wasn't so rough. Like, good for you. So the sheer embarrassment makes Mei Ling race across Toronto and back home in panda form, and her mom reveals to her that it's an ability passed down through their family. The scroll of Soni's legend says, Soni prayed and called to the red panda god, who bestowed upon her divine power and granted her freedom, which is notable because her descendants, Mei Ling's mom, grandma, and aunts, see the power as the opposite of freedom and opted to seal it away instead. I think there's a Diaspora allegory here when Mei Ling's mom says they only sealed it after coming to the new world. The older generations of Diaspora tend to feel like they need to abandon much of their heritage to fit in, but we new generations are like, no, we are who we are. We are of both cultures, and you will not shame us into making ourselves less, so we're easier for you to comprehend. And I think this movie reflects that. Also, the war flags in this backstory were what confirmed that Sun Yi lived in the Ming Dynasty. So again, kudos to the production team. I really like this backstory sequence, both because the story itself is really touching, and because it's done in the style of classical Chinese paintings, and that's cool. Mei Ling's parents tell her the panda magic can be sealed away, but she has to wait until the red moon on the 25th, which devastates her because it means she won't be able to go to the Four Town concert. The next morning, her friends come to cheer her up, and they're totally accepting of her panda transformation, which is so wholesome. I am so happy with the depiction of teen girl friendship in this movie, and the realistically weird way they speak to each other. Mei Ling's parents are unconvinced by her campaign to go to the concert, but she and her friends come up with a scheme to milk people's interest in Mei Ling's panda form to make money. And I think part of the reason this movie was set in 2002 was to avoid the question of, wouldn't this be all over social media and draw international attention? You can't go viral if nobody has a smartphone. Of course, in a more realistic movie, Mei Ling would have been snatched by the government and experimented on anyway. But this is a movie meant for children, and therefore, there is also no discourse or reminder of 9/11. Just when Mei Ling and her friends think they can't make enough money in time for 4 tickets, her bully offers her enough money to cover it, if she shows up to his birthday party as her panda. Of course, on the day of the party, Mei Ling's aunt and grandma suddenly show up. I felt so called out by this ensemble Mei Ling's aunts were wearing because my mom has this exact style of Louis Vuitton bag. And Louis Vuitton is so overused, I don't even consider it a cool luxury luxury item anymore. It's just tacky to me now. And fun fact, the tallest aunt is clearly based on Shen Dianxia, whose name I once mistook as a superhero name, like the electricity saver. This is a joke that only Mandarin speakers will get, I'm sorry. Mei Ling's aunts are very Chinese auntie, including their tendency to comment on your weight without reservation. This is something that catches certain Westerners off guard, but yeah, it's not considered rude to be like, wow, you got fat. So beware. Mei Ling eventually manages to sneak out of the house and get to the party, where they end up having a great time. I did wonder very early on whether Mei Ling could actually keep the panda. I mean, in a different movie, she'd be using it to become a superhero. Then here is why I disagree with the take saying this movie presents an overly sanitized Toronto with no racial tension. Tyler saying that Mei Ling's family temple is creepy is indeed racist. Mei Ling rightfully loses it and attacks him for it. Mei Ling's mom, having stumbled upon Mei Ling's stash of crimes under her bed, rushes to Tyler's house just in time to stop things from going further. She blames Mei Ling's friends for leading her astray instead of Mei Ling herself, which I cannot relate to because my mom always blames me for everything. Then comes the night of both the panda sealing ritual and the concert. I'm not sure if all of you know, but the number 4 is considered unlucky in Chinese culture because it sounds like death. Some buildings will straight up call their 4th floor the 5th floor instead because no one wants their address to be on the 4th floor. As the ritual approaches, Mei Ling starts to hesitate, which I was very delighted about. She finds out from her dad that her mom actually injured her grandma in her panda form because the grandma didn't approve of him. This goes to show the cycle of rebellion and acquiescence in this family. Each generation rebels a little more and gives in a little less. Also, I really like the portrayal of Mei Ling's dad because, yeah, Chinese dads are really awkward. It's true. When I first watched this movie, I really wished the priest had been a woman, but now I actually think there's symbolism in how he's an old dude. It could be that he represents the patriarchy sealing away the true power of these women so they can be more palatable to society, which makes it all the more meaningful that Mei Ling rejects the ritual and decides to keep her panda instead. Then she pisses off all the parents watching this by going to the concert without permission. There, she reconciles with her friends and they have a great time. Until her mom shows up as a kaiju red panda. I love this. I love this movie's climax. It was so much fun. I mean, Mei Ling defeating her mother by horrifying her with twerking? That's peak comedy. This is peak comedy. The sequence of Mei Ling's aunts and grandma transforming together was also awesome. Though even though it didn't quite make sense with the established lore, I don't know, I think the script of this movie definitely needed a lot more work, but whatever. At least we now know that they can all get their pandas back at any time. Sequel, where they form a superhero team? When? The music during the final ritual, where the mantra chanting blends with the four-town pop song? Also amazing. It really exemplifies the spirit of this movie, where traditional Chinese values come together with individualistic Western values. Another side note, but I saw a review in the New York Times that accused this movie of exoticism because it reinforces the stereotype that Asians have mystical Oriental magic or whatever, and it's like, come on, this is a movie by a Chinese woman. Why are we talking about this movie as if white people made it? They didn't. I am of the opinion that self-orientalization is not a valid concept. In fact, it is victim blaming. It is saying that the oppressed group needs to avoid certain behaviors or avoid telling certain stories because the oppressors might take it the wrong way and make assumptions. But is that not putting partial responsibility on the oppressed for the prejudices they face? I just don't think that you can fight prejudice by telling the victims what not to do. In communities of color, there are certain people who are so hyper-conscious of the white gaze, worrying so much about whether aspects in the stories we tell about our own cultures will give racist white people more ammo, and it's like, who cares? Racists are gonna be racists. It's not our fault. It will never be our fault. Self-orientalization is not a thing. Moving on. There's a touching moment where Mei Ling leads her mom out of her repressed guilt and trauma over her relationship with her own mom, then that mother-daughter pair reconcile. While all the other women in Mei Ling's family choose to seal their pandas again, Mei Ling stands by her decision to keep hers. I bet Sung Yi is super happy that a descendant of hers is finally willing to accept her gift again. Thankfully, the characters live in a universe where people with superpowers do not get abducted by the government, and so all the Lee family has to do is repay $100 million to rebuild the Sky Dome, apparently. The scene at the end, where Mei Ling is out and proud with her panda ears and tail, reminded me painfully of when my parents would take me to cosplay meetups, despite being utterly confused about why I would dress in such weird costumes and wigs. Man, it must have been a chore to deal with me. So that was Turning Red. The more I think about this movie, the more I appreciate it. It was such an honest exploration of mother-daughter relationships and female adolescence, and I think the reason it pissed off so many people was because it hit too close to reality, and they don't want to admit it. And I don't mean reality as in things they've personally experienced, but the reality that this is exactly how teenage girls act. Society has this obsession with trying to deny and restrain female autonomy, and one way it does this is by imposing loads of guilt and shame onto teenage girls. Think about it. Everything teenage girls like get made fun of. Boy bands, young adult books, expressing emotions. You associate something with teenage girls, and the public suddenly thinks it's worse somehow. So basically, teenage girls aren't allowed to like anything unless it's something boys are encouraged to like. Teenage girls are supposed to deny their desires, repress their emotions, and cover up their shoulders to not make the rest of society uncomfortable. You know what? F that. Mei Ling did the right thing, and this movie had the right message. Take up space, own your power, no more shame, no more guilt over simply being a teenage girl. And that is what I have to say about this movie. If you'd like to support me in doing more videos, please consider buying my books, especially this one coming out so soon, or tipping me on Ko-fi or supporting me on Patreon. Shoutouts to my Patreon Guardian Lions, Cooper Malamute, Curious Madcat, Darion, Do It Out of Spite, Eduardo Aguirre, Hayerim, Jose Velazquez, Kakuga, Kytes Universe, Lacey Gray, Ling Yu, Molly McAllister, and Shady Beach. And thanks again to Surfshark for sponsoring this video, and I will see you next time.